Do you believe in magic? That was the question that my grandma asked me when I just turned 10. I could still remember that time where I sat beside the fireplace, waiting for her to tell me a story like she used to do whenever she was in the mood for it. A story about a world where elves sing, fairies dance, dragons soar the sky, and giants roam the land. A land filled with dangers and mysteries where the world tree, Yggdrasil, stood tall and watched over all of creation. "Grandma, what is magic?" I asked back then, and she only laughed and lightly patted my head. "Magic is the power that lies within a person's heart," my grandma Agnes replied with a smile. My great-grandfather once told me that the bigger a person's heart is, the stronger their magic is. Back then, I didn't understand what he was trying to tell me, but now I know it well. Magic is in the heart. Is my heart big, Grandma? Can I use magic? All new chapters on Novel.com. Of course, Ethan. You are my grandson. I'm sure that one day you will also discover your own kind of magic. These memories of my childhood that flashed briefly in my head put a smile on my face. Even though I was wounded all over, and dozens of monsters surrounded me, the fear I felt earlier vanished without a trace. "I'm sorry, but can you lend me your strength one more time?" I asked as I looked at the young lady in my arms, whose life was trickling away like the sands in an hourglass. Blood seeped at the corner of her lips, and even then, it didn't diminish her beauty. Her eyes, that were as red as blood, were still clear, and it made me fall in love with her all over again. "I'm dying, and you're still trying to take advantage of me?" the young lady asked in a teasing tone. "Do you want me to leave you here?" I asked back with a smile. "You want to die? Ha ha ha! I'm just joking." That didn't sound like a joke to Mamie. Even in this helpless situation, I couldn't help but tease her. She knew this as well, so she just played along with me even though she was hurting. I lowered my head and kissed her soft lips. The kiss was sweet, and yet it tasted like blood. When the kiss ended, I laid her down gently on the ground before standing up to face the monsters who had come to end our lives. "The prologue has ended," I said as I held the wand in my hand tightly and pointed it at the fiends who wished for me to die. "The real story starts now." 3 people riding on broomsticks flew across the moonlit sky with determined looks on their faces. Miles away from them, several colorful lights illuminated the heavens as a battle between wizards and witches of 2 different factions was being waged. The 3 people knew that turning back to help their friends would only endanger the person they were trying to protect, so with heavy hearts they flew to the east in order to escape their pursuers. Half an hour later, they saw several lights in the distance and knew that they were nearing a town. After exchanging a few words with her mother and father, the young witch flying in the center of the formation descended from the sky while her parents kept watch of their surroundings. "The time to part has come, my love," the witch said as she looked down at the basket in her arms with tears falling down her face. She held her newborn baby lovingly and kissed his forehead before landing beside a farmhouse. The young witch then walked up toward the doorway and gently placed the basket in her hands on the ground before kneeling beside it. "Please forgive me," the young witch said as she summoned a wand in her hand. "I pray that you will grow up to live a normal and happy life. Know that no matter where I am, I will always think of you and love you with all of my heart." If possible, she didn't want to do this, but in order to let her child live, she had no choice but to do the unthinkable. "Ars vim extermina," the young witch said softly, before lightly tapping the tip of her wand on the child's chest in order to destroy his magic circuits, making it impossible for him to use magic at any point in his life. A second later, a magical crest appeared, where the young witch had tapped her wand, and the baby's body glowed crimson for a brief moment before fading away. Wah! Perhaps the process of having his magic circuits destroyed brought him great pain, so the baby cried his heart out, which almost broke the young witch's heart. Suddenly, she heard the sound of footsteps headed towards the door, so she immediately mounted her broom and flew toward the roof of the farmhouse. Her baby's frantic cries of pain only grew louder, as if sensing that one of the people who love him the most left him behind. The young witch covered her lips with her left hand, as she too wept bitter tears. It was at that moment when she heard the door opening, and a shout of surprise that came from a woman reached her ears. "It's okay, little one," the middle-aged woman said softly as she picked up the basket of the crying baby in her arms. "Please don't cry. The middle-aged woman lightly rocked the basket as she searched her surroundings, hoping to see the person who left such a small and frail baby on her doorstep in the middle of the night. A baby, a middle-aged man asked as he walked beside his wife to look at the child that was crying sadly in her arms. Who could be so heartless as to leave a child like this? Dear, please don't shout. You will only make the child cry louder. Ha! Fine, let's go inside first. It's too cold here. The baby might catch a cold. As the couple entered the house, the young witch raised her wand to erase any traces of magic in the surroundings before mounting her broom once more to join her parents in the sky. She had to leave the town as soon as possible to prevent their pursuers from discovering her tracks. The farther she was away from her child, the safer he would be. Soon, the young witch's parents flew by her side as the three of them headed northwards. All three of them had sad expressions on their faces because they had left one of their family members behind. Even though it wasn't an easy decision to make, they still did it in order to give the child a future of living a normal life as an ordinary human. Riyadh updated stories at novelbin.com several years later. Come back here, you little rascal. Leaves fluttered in the air as a teenage boy with dark blue hair ran through the fields like a wild horse that had been freed from the stables. His blue eyes were filled with mirth at the prospect of foiling his grandma's plans to send him to St. Clair Academy. For Ethan, going to the academy was boring, so he decided to resist his grandma's plan to tie him up and send him there in a cardboard box. Ethan, come back here, you dunderhead. An old yet powerful voice called out from behind the boy who was running for his life. Don't let me get my hands on you, or you will regret it. Ethan chuckled internally because there was no way that his grandma would be able to catch up to him. How could an old hag who did nothing but teach him math all day capture a fit, healthy teenage boy like him? Out of curiosity, the smug-faced teenager turned his head to look behind him to check if his grandma was still in hot pursuit. Although he disliked the prospect of going to St. Clair Academy, he was worried that his grandma would trip and fall on the ground while running after him. As he turned his head, the first thing he saw was a flying sandal that was only a few inches away from his head. A cry of pain reverberated in the surroundings as the sandal hit its designated target in the forehead, making the teenage boy lose his balance and fall on the ground. You silly boy, you dare to run away from me? Ethan's grandma, Agnes, walked up to the teenager with bloodshot eyes. You have two choices. The first one is to go to the academy obediently. The second is to go there butt naked with your hands and feet tied. There is no third choice, so you'd better choose wisely. The teenage boy propped himself up on the ground and massaged his forehead, where a red bump had started to form. Grandma, how many times must I tell you that I don't want to go to school? Ethan asked back, with a face filled with injustice. Besides, Timmy said that St. Clair Academy looks down on commoners like us. How can someone as handsome, charismatic, and awesome as me study in a place like that? Wouldn't that be a waste of my good looks? Agnes's eyes twitched as she looked at her grandson. Although she agreed that her grandson was handsome, charismatic, and awesome, she still wanted him to study in the prestigious academy in order to find a suitable wife. She was getting older, but Agnes still wanted to hug her great-grandchild. For that to happen, she needed to bring Ethan to the academy in the hopes that he would be able to nab an heiress and live a happy and comfortable life. The richer, the better. Was that too much to ask? Ethan, we've had this discussion many times already, Agnes answered. Every year you refuse to go to school. It has already been 2 years since then. Do you really want to grow up as a good-for-nothing and play with your silly games all day? Yes, Ethan replied in a heartbeat. You little piece of shit, Agnes roared in anger. Agnes was usually a very calm old lady, but when it came to her grandson, her temper was always short. Out of anger, she reached under her skirt and pulled out a spiked club that was over 2 meters long. Ethan shuddered when he saw his grandma pull out a 2-meter-long spiked club out of that place. His first reaction was to say, ew, but he knew that now was not the time to do that. The spiked club posed a real threat to him, and if that hit his face, what would happen to his good looks? Although he found his grandma's actions unladylike, the threat of getting hit by something that long, hard, and spiky made his liver itch. Grandma, I realized just now that as a respectable young man who had just turned 17 a month ago, I should properly study at a learning institution, Ethan said in a righteous voice, as if he was a fearless warrior that was about to fight an army that numbered in the thousands. It is my duty as a citizen of the realm to study and ensure that our country will prosper for many years to come. Agnes, who was about to swat her grandson silly with the spiked club, was flabbergasted by his eloquent speech. For a brief moment, she thought that using the spiked club to discipline him was overkill. However, that thought only lasted for a brief moment. She knew how pretentious Ethan was, so she took the matter in her own hands and kicked his bum repeatedly. The sound of a pig being slaughtered reverberated inside the Gremory residence as Ethan wailed and begged his grandma to stop kicking him. The screaming only stopped several minutes later, and the residence once again returned to its peaceful state. The next day, Ethan and Agnes traveled to the railway station together. Agnes decided to accompany Ethan. Knowing her grandson, she was afraid that the latter would run away and not board the train. The teenage boy knew that if he did something funny, the incident that happened yesterday would happen again. His bum was still aching from the relentless onslaught that it received, and he decided to be obedient for now. And run away later? Ha, Grandma, do you really think that you will have your way? Ethan laughed internally. The moment I get into that academy, I will definitely take the return train back. Ha ha ha! Just you wait for my triumphant return. Agnes was not aware of Ethan's stupid plan and just dragged him to the platform. If she knew what her good-for-nothing grandson was planning, she would definitely tie him to the train to ensure that he learned a lesson he wouldn't forget. Go, make sure to call me once you arrive at the academy, Agnes said as she patted Ethan's head. I know that you disagree with me, but that is understandable. Ethan, the world is big, far bigger than you can ever imagine. For you to stay cooped up on the farm is a waste of your good looks. How can my handsome and awesome grandson not accomplish anything in his lifetime? Ethan looked at his grandma with a smile. He felt touched when the old hag called him handsome and awesome. Because of that, he decided to stay in the academy for 2 days before going back home. Here is your ticket, Agnes said as she handed a red envelope to him. Just ask one of the conductors for directions if you are unsure about what train to ride. Okay, thank you, Grandma, Ethan replied and kissed Agnes's right cheek. Agnes smiled and kissed her grandson's forehead. When you return, make sure to bring home a beautiful lady. I'll make sure to take good care of her. Ethan rolled his eyes before waving his hand to bid Agnes farewell. Clearly, his grandma still hadn't given up on hooking Ethan up with a beautiful girl so she could hold her great-grandchild. As Ethan walked towards one of the conductors in the station, he saw something running towards him out of the corner of his eye. Before he could even react, he was pushed down abruptly and fell on his butt, which made him cry out in pain because his bum, that had been repeatedly kicked yesterday by his grandma, had suffered another beating before he could even leave his hometown behind. Enduring the pain, he glared at the one responsible for the incident and gave them a piece of his mind. Hey, watch where you're going! Ethan wasn't able to continue his shouting as his gaze landed on the person that bumped into him just now. A young lady with long silver blonde hair slowly stood up from the floor and glanced in his direction. This glance only lasted for a brief moment before she picked up one of the small red envelopes on the ground and hurried away. You could have at least said sorry, Ethan grumbled before picking up the red envelope lying on the ground beside him. Ha, what a bad start. The young teenager sighed before approaching one of the uniformed staff members in the train station to ask for directions. Excuse me, sir, Ethan said as he looked at the name of the train he was going to ride in his ticket. This is my first time in the train station, and I was wondering if you can help me find the platform for the Brynhilder Express. The middle-aged man looked at the teenage boy with a smile before pointing to his right side. Just head straight until you see a black door that is being guarded by 2 men wearing black uniforms, the middle-aged man said. Show them your ticket, and they will allow you to pass through the door. You better hurry up. There's just 15 minutes before your train departs. Thank you, sir. Ethan bowed his head to thank the middle-aged man before running in the direction he had pointed earlier. Ethan might be reluctant to go to the academy, but since his grandma asked him to go, he would at least make sure that he stayed there for a day or two before returning home. It didn't take long before he saw the 2 men that the train staff was talking about. Show me your ticket, one of the men stated as soon as Ethan tried to walk past them. Only the students of the academy are allowed past this point, the other man said as he eyed the teenage boy with a critical gaze. The two men had intimidating looks on their faces, which made Ethan subconsciously take a step back out of fear. Clearly, they were not the friendly type, so he decided to not mess around anymore and handed them his ticket obediently. VIP room ticket? One of the men arched an eyebrow after seeing the ticket that Ethan had handed to him. Very well, you may pass. Make sure to only enter the compartment that is designated on your ticket. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Ethan stuttered. Go, the other man said. The train will be departing soon. Ethan nodded his head and entered the door as he was told. After entering the door, he went down a flight of stairs leading underground. Since he was in a hurry, he didn't have time to appreciate the unique design of the stairwell, which didn't match the setting of an old train station. Welcome to Brynhildur Express, a young lady with light brown hair said with a smile as soon as Ethan walked towards her. The train will be departing soon. So, please show me your ticket so you can enter the train. Ethan did as he was told and showed her his ticket. VIP compartment number 69. The young lady's smile became brighter when she found out that she was dealing with a VIP student. You can board the train now. Please allow me to help you with your luggage. Thank you. Ethan smiled back at the kind young lady who was being very helpful to him. A few minutes later, he sat inside a very spacious and classy compartment, which made him wonder if his grandma had prepared all of this beforehand to ensure that he wouldn't try to run away. Grandma really loves me, Ethan said softly. Fine, I'll stay in the academy for a week before going home. While Ethan was enjoying the comfort of his VIP compartment, the silver-haired beauty that he had bumped earlier was arguing with the two men that were guarding the door that led to the Brynhildur Express. Young lady, do not make things difficult for us, one of the men said as he barred the door with his body. Only those with the right ticket can pass through this door. But this is the ticket that my aunt gave me, the teenage beauty argued. Are you telling me that Professor Ophelia made a mistake? The other man glanced at his partner for his opinion, but his partner only shook his head. Sorry, young miss, but rules are rules, one of the men said. It will be best if you just. Just before the men could tell the young lady to go home, a middle-aged lady called out to her from behind. Alice, why are you still here? Aunt, you're finally here. They won't let me ride the train. Professor Ophelia. One of the professors of Brynhildur Academy frowned before looking at the two men that were preventing her niece from boarding her train. Gentlemen, is there some kind of problem? Professor Ophelia asked. One of the men gave an awkward smile before bowing respectfully to the professor. Professor, did you perhaps make a mistake when you gave your niece the ticket? The man asked. Her ticket isn't meant for the Brynhildur Express. It's meant for the St. Clair Express. Excuse me? Professor Ophelia asked back before taking the ticket from her niece to take a better look at it. A glance was enough to tell her that the ticket was indeed meant for a different train, which made her frown. Sorry, Professor, but rules are rules, one of the men said. I really can't make an exception, even if it is you, Professor. The words of the guard broke Professor Ophelia out of her daze, which made her nod her head in understanding. Sorry about this, Professor Ophelia replied with a smile. It seems that my age is catching up to me. I'll personally take my niece to the academy. Alice, let's go. Professor Ophelia held her niece's hand and walked away from the two men at a brisk pace. She might be getting old, but she was certain that she gave Alice the VIP ticket that would allow her to have a comfortable journey to the academy. When they were out of anyone's sight, the professor summoned a wand out of thin air and waved it around them, creating a dome of invisibility, preventing anyone from seeing or hearing the things that they were about to discuss. What happened? Professor Ophelia asked. Tell me how you suddenly got the wrong ticket. Alice, who had kept her silence since she was taken away by her aunt, raised her head to answer her question. A while later, Professor Ophelia's face became pale when she heard her niece's explanation. It was also at that moment when the faint whistle of a departing train was heard, making her face become paler. We have to hurry, Professor Ophelia said, as she grabbed Alice's hand in order to leave the train station. We must get to the academy before the Ordinarius is screened by the scrying crystal. Professor Ophelia knew that if the gatekeeper were to discover that a normal teenage boy had managed to infiltrate the Wizard Academy, that teenager would definitely suffer a fate that was worse than death. This compartment sure is nice, Ethan muttered. It almost makes me feel a little bad about ditching the academy. Naturally, the word almost was there, which meant that Ethan would certainly leave the academy after a few days. The train had just left the station, and the blue-haired boy had nothing to do but admire the passing scenery outside his window. Although there was a smile on his face, deep inside he was feeling anxious. This was the first time he had left his home, and he would be lying if he said that he wasn't scared of going to an unknown place filled with strangers. While Ethan was deep in thought, he heard the call of a lady asking if anyone wanted to buy some snacks from her trolley. The blue-haired boy then opened the door of his compartment to check if there was something that he could buy from the lady's trolley. "Yes, dear. Did you find something to your liking?" a middle-aged lady asked with a smile. "How much do the potato chips cost?" Ethan pointed at the big pack of potato chips that was on top of the trolley. "5 coppers, the middle-aged lady replied. "How many would you lick?" The middle-aged lady's body stiffened after taking a good look at the blue-haired boy who was still checking the snacks on her trolley. From the depths of her brown eyes, a hint of surprise and excitement could be seen. "Dear, why don't we go inside your compartment first?" the middle-aged lady proposed. "That way, we won't be blocking anyone's path. What do you think?" Ethan looked at the surroundings and noticed that the lady and her trolley were indeed blocking the aisle. Because of this, he decided to invite her inside his compartment so they wouldn't bother anyone. "Of course," Ethan replied. "Please come in." All new chapters on Novel.com. The middle-aged lady smiled as she pushed her trolley inside Ethan's compartment. After taking a long and hard look at the boy, she was now certain that he was someone that wasn't supposed to be on the Brynhilder Express. "Please, take a seat," Ethan said in a very polite manner. Ethan's grandma, Agnes, trained him to be respectful to ladies, especially to the elderly. Although they weren't that rich, she made sure to teach her grandson how to be a proper gentleman. Of course, Ethan only applied the things he learned from his grandma to other ladies. Family members weren't included in the gentleman's code. "Thank you, I'll accept your offer." The middle-aged lady sat across Ethan and watched him with a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Is this your first time going to the academy?" "Yes." Ethan raised his head to make eye contact with the middle-aged lady. "My grandma wanted me to study a business-related course at the academy and bring home a beautiful noble lady as my wife." "Is that so? Your grandma must be a very wise person." The middle-aged lady chuckled. "Well, my grandma is indeed very wise, but she likes to spank me all the time. I mean, I'm already 17. It would be embarrassing if others were to know about IIT. The middle-aged lady arched her eyebrows. "So you say, but you're actually telling me this. Aren't you afraid that I will spread the news that you're still being spanked at your age?" Ethan chuckled before shaking his head. "I'm sure that a lady as beautiful as you wouldn't spread this news to other people." "Oh, my so young and already a sweet talker." The middle-aged lady wasn't able to stop herself from chuckling after hearing the teenage boy's reply. "It seems that the noble ladies in the academy are in danger. A wolf in sheep's clothing is about to sneak inside their pen." Ethan didn't know why, but for some reason, he felt at ease while talking to the middle-aged lady whose calming presence reminded him of his grandma back home. Before he knew it, almost 15 minutes had passed, and the middle-aged lady finally decided that it was about time to leave. "Since it's your first time going to the academy, you can have this one for free," the middle-aged lady said as she gave Ethan the biggest pack of potato chips on her trolley. "Also, take this as a souvenir of our meeting." The middle-aged lady took out a black bracelet from her pocket and personally attached it to Ethan's wrist. "Ethan, remember this." The middle-aged lady held the blue-haired boy's hand in a gentle way. "No matter what happens, do not remove the bracelet. It is a good luck charm that will keep you safe in the academy." Ethan felt touched because, aside from his grandma, this was the first time that an older person had given him something for free. At first he wanted to refuse, but the kind lady's words touched his heart, making it hard for him to reject her generosity. "Thank you, Auntie," Ethan replied. "If in the future our paths cross again, I will definitely return this favor." The middle-aged lady smiled. "Very well. I will keep your words close to my heart. I look forward to meeting you again in the future." After those parting words, the middle-aged lady finally left the VIP compartment and continued to make her usual rounds. She had been assigned by her superiors on the Brynhilder Express to look for those who had lost their way and ensure that all of them would be kept safe from harm. "I better tell my superiors as soon as I get off the train," the middle-aged lady muttered. Things are going to get interesting in the academy. Ethan, who wasn't aware of the lady's other motives, was in a good mood because he got some free snacks, as well as a souvenir for free. What a kind lady, Ethan said as he opened his bag of chips. I wish there were more people like her in the world. At that exact moment, the train entered a tunnel. Although it was dark, Ethan didn't mind it one bit. He just ate one potato chip after another until the train finally left the tunnel. It was at that moment when the blue-haired boy's eyes widened in shock because the scenery he saw outside of the window looked surreal. Floating islands with flowing waterfalls appeared in his vision. It was the first time he had seen something so beautiful, and it made him wonder if he had fallen asleep when the train entered the tunnel. Suddenly, he heard a loud roar which made him shift his gaze to his left side. Ethan's jaw and the potato chip he was about to eat dropped when he saw a giant eye looking at him from outside his window. A few seconds later, the eye moved away, revealing a large creature with red scales and two magnificent wings on its back. The blue-haired boy had seen something similar in the fairy tale picture book that his grandma had given him while he was still young. Although he didn't know if he had fallen into some kind of daydream or not, one thing was for sure. What he was seeing right now looked so real that it would be very hard for him to know if he was really dreaming or not. With another loud and mighty roar, the dragon flapped its wings and flew westwards, leaving the Brynhilder Express and the shocked teenager behind. Okay, Ethan, calm down, Ethan said as he lightly patted his chest. First, let's see if I am dreaming or not. The teenage boy pinched his arm so hard that he almost cried out in pain. It was then when he confirmed that he wasn't dreaming. There must be some logical explanation for all of this, Ethan muttered as he picked up the bag of chips that had fallen on the carpeted floor. I mean, since I saw it, others might have seen it too, right? But why isn't anyone on the train shouting? The blue-haired boy thought long and hard and came to a conclusion. Dragons flying near trains was a very normal thing to happen. Maybe it's because I was raised in the countryside, so I'm not aware of something so common, Ethan muttered. Maybe this is the norm for people in the big cities. Maybe Grandma was right. Perhaps I should see the world more so I won't remain ignorant. After finally finding an explanation that could satisfy him, the blue-haired Boyansé again started to eat his potato chips, while admiring the picturesque scenery outside of his window. Although he was still feeling doubtful about what he had just seen a while ago, he believed that he would better understand the situation once he arrived at the academy and learned a few things from it. Astraeus, I know that it will be difficult, but please do your best to arrive at the academy before the Brynhilder Express does, Professor Ophelia said as she lightly patted the back of her griffin. My reputation and that boy's life are at stake. The griffin gave a low shriek of acknowledgement as it flapped its mighty wings to traverse the Rostrever forest. The professor, as well as Alice, hurriedly left the station and went to the nearest magic gate in order to go to the wizard world. Fortunately, Professor Ophelia left her mount, Astraeus, near the magic gate at the station. This gave them the means to immediately pursue the Brynhilder Express, which would arrive at the Brynhilder station in less than 2 hours. And will we be able to catch up to it? Alice asked as she held onto the professor's waist. Truth be told, she didn't really care if they caught up to the train or not. For her, what happened in the station was the blue-haired boy's fault. If he hadn't blocked her path, she wouldn't have bumped into him, and they wouldn't find themselves in the current mess they were in. You should pray that we do, Alice, Professor Ophelia said anxiously. If not, your father will be very displeased. The beautiful young lady, who didn't think that what happened earlier was that big of a deal, immediately shuddered after hearing her aunt's reply. Of all the people that Alice didn't want to offend or disappoint, it was none other than her father, who was the current minister of the Magic Bureau, who managed the concerns of the entire wizard world. An hour later, Astraeus gave a resounding shriek as if informing Professor Ophelia about something. Hearing her mount's report, the professor took out her wand and lightly tapped it on the monocle on her right eye. Immediately, her vision zoomed in on the distance. There, she saw the train that they were trying to catch up to, which gave the professor renewed hope. Unlike the train that was fixed to how the railway was built, a griffin could take shortcuts and soar over mountains, allowing for faster travel. Now that her target was in sight, Professor Ophelia asked her loyal mount to take the shortest route to the station where the children would disembark. As Astraeus was about to give a positive reply, a mighty roar reverberated in the surroundings, which forced the griffin to take a nosedive towards the ground. A moment later, searing hot flames flew past the place where the griffin was flying earlier. If Astraeus didn't descend right away, it might have been roasted to oblivion alongside the two witches that were mounted on his back. An adult red dragon, Alice cried out in alarm as the monstrous beast started to chase after them. Adult dragons were one of the apex predators of the wizard world, and they took great pleasure in hunting down any hippogriffs and griffins that happened to cross their way. Professor Ophelia knew that this was a matter of life and death, so she took out her wand and instructed Alice to do the same. All new stories at NVLB.com. Repeat after me, Noobs Atra Fumus. Do you understand? Professor Ophelia asked as she pointed her wand at the red dragon who was following behind their back. Alice nodded and also pointed her wand at the dragon. At the count of 3, Professor Ophelia stated. 1, 2, 3. Noobs Atra Fumus. Jet black smoke erupted from the tip of their wands, blocking the dragon's sight. The smoke then expanded in their surroundings, covering the entire forest in a cloud of black smoke. This wasn't the first time that Professor Ophelia had used this spell while traveling in the wizard world, and her mount, Astraeus, already knew what to do in this situation. Using the smokescreen as cover, the griffin flew as low as possible, nearly touching the ground in the process. It was looking for a safe place to hide in order to escape the dragon's pursuit, while the black smoke was still active. Fortunately, its keen eyesight allowed it to find a dense patch of trees in the distance, which was a perfect cover from the red dragon that was hot on its heels. A moment later, a loud roar of annoyance reverberated in the surroundings, scaring almost all of the wildlife in the forest. As all the creatures, big and small, ran to find a place to hide, Astraeus landed on the ground and squeezed itself into the dense patch of trees before crouching down. Professor Ophelia covered Alice's mouth with her hand as she carefully observed their surroundings. The spell she cast was a multi-purpose spell that not only blocked one's vision, but also erased any scent in the environment. Its effect would linger for half an hour before dispersing completely, which was enough time for them to evade the dragon's sharp sense of smell. Suddenly, a black shadow passed over the trees they were hiding in. Professor Ophelia gripped her wand tightly, while her other hand remained over Alice's lips, preventing the girl from uttering a single word that might alert the dragon of their whereabouts. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Astraeus gave a short shriek, telling the professor that it could no longer sense the dragon in the surroundings. "Fly low for now, Astraeus. Run if you have to," Professor Ophelia said as she sighed in her heart. "That dragon might still be around. It is best that we keep out of its sight for the time being." The griffin nodded its head in understanding and began to run through the forest like a horse, while looking for a place where it could freely open its wings to fly. Professor Ophelia felt very bitter about the appearance of the red dragon, because it was the worst timing ever. If the red dragon hadn't appeared, they would have definitely been able to beat the train to the station and apprehend the boy before the Magic Bureau got wind of his existence. "Everyone, we have arrived at our destination," the train conductor said as he shook a handbell in his hand. "Make sure that you don't leave any of your luggage behind you as you depart the train." "I repeat, we have arrived at our destination. Make sure that you don't leave any of your luggage behind as you depart the train. We have arrived at Brynhilde Station." Ethan opened the door of his compartment and walked down the aisle carrying his bags. Was it supposed to be Brynhilde Station? Ethan thought. If I remember correctly, it should be Stanmore Station. From there, it would be a 5-minute walk to the gates of St. Clair Academy. The blue-haired boy still had his doubts, but since they arrived at the train's destination, he had no choice but to disembark. As soon as he left the train, he saw all the teenage boys and girls being ushered to several carriages that lined up the side of the station. "Each carriage can be shared by 4 people, the station master said, as he and his subordinates helped guide the students who had arrived at the station. First years to the left, second years to the right, third years and above, you already know where to go. Don't tarry here and go to your own lanes." Ethan, who had been enrolled as a first year by his grandma, lined up on the left where several teenage boys and girls that were around his age had lined up as well. "Please prepare your train tickets," the station master stated. "Your carriage will be determined by your train ticket. Economy class goes to the black carriages, first class gets the purple ones, and VIP tickets get the golden carriages." Those who have very important person tickets, please come to me. Ethan looked at his ticket and saw the words VIP written in bold gold letters on its upper left side. Seeing that his ticket was indeed a VIP ticket, the blue-haired boy walked towards the station master and presented his ticket to him. "I see, so you're one of the VIPs of the first years," the station master said as he scrutinized Ethan's ticket. "Very well, come with me." All the first years who had lined up on their respective platforms gazed at Ethan with a look of jealousy and envy. VIP tickets were a form of status. They could only be obtained by people of high status in the magic world. Students who received such a ticket were those who came from highly influential families, or those who had high positions in the Magic Bureau. "He's a first year? I better form a good relationship with him later. I hope we were in the same class. If I become his friend, wouldn't that mean that I'll be able to rub shoulders with the nobility? He's quite good looking. Is he perhaps single? Mother said that I should look for high-ranking nobles. Even if they only make me their concubine, I will be secure for life." Murmurs spread throughout the surroundings as Ethan was taken away by the station master. All of them wanted to be on good terms with the blue-haired boy, who seemed to belong to a very influential family in the magic world. However, not all of them were thinking along these lines. A young lady with light brown hair and green eyes looked at the blue-haired boy in the distance in confusion. "How can he possibly be here?" the young lady thought. "Are my eyes deceiving me? Is he perhaps a different person?" The young lady wasn't quite unsure if the blue-haired boy was someone she knew or not. "It doesn't matter." The young lady handed her ticket to the staff member in front of her. "If it is really him, we will meet at the testing site later." "Grandma, you are the best," Ethan muttered, as he sat on a very comfortable couch inside the golden carriage that was assigned to him. "Man, I almost feel sorry about my plan to leave the academy after a few days." While the young man was feeling a bit guilty about what he planned to do after arriving at the academy, his carriage started to move. Ethan looked at the passing scenery, but the only thing he could see were trees on both sides of the carriage. Several other carriages were traveling down the road as well, but all of them were on the right side of the road. The golden carriage traveled on the left, free from any kind of obstruction. A few minutes later, the carriage arrived at its destination, and Ethan disembarked while admiring the academy in front of him. "It's bigger than I thought," Ethan muttered, as he looked at the learning institution that he would spend some time in. Before the blue-haired boy could even wonder what to do next, a man wearing gray robes walked out of the gates and greeted him with a smile. "You must be Professor Ophelia's prized disciple," the gray-robed man said with a smile. "Come, we should head to the Plaza of Beginnings where the other first years will gather shortly. There, the appraisal stone will measure your magical power and assign which manor you will be staying in. Please, come this way." Up-to-dated from Novia Bine, Siam, Ethan nodded and followed the kind man whom he initially thought to be his tour guide. As they walked together, the gray-robed man introduced himself as Nigel Brand, a professor that taught the study of magical creatures class. Ethan had no idea what kind of subject the study of magical creatures was, so he decided to not talk about this subject and instead ask Professor Nigel questions about Brynhilder Academy. The professor thought that this was his opportunity to form a good relationship with a handsome teenager, so he made sure to answer all of Ethan's questions with as many details as possible. The more Ethan asked, the more confused he became. Njal told him that the Brynhilder Academy was built after the heroes defeated the Demon Lord, who once threatened the magical world. It was founded by none other than Fortis Dud, who believed that everyone had the right to study magic, even those who were born with very little magical power. Within the academy grounds, 5 manors were built, and each of them carried the will and belief of each of the 5 heroes that fought for the peace of the world. Agmunda Schwartz, Schwartz Manor; Sven Terra, Terra Manor; Magni Jaeger, Jaeger Manor; Eilifer Ekes, Ekes Manor; Fortis Dud, Dud Manor. Schwartz Manor was the place where wizards and witches who specialized in black magic conducted their magical experiments. Terra Manor was the place where wizards and witches who specialized in growing things, like plants, flowers, or any magic associated with nature, gathered. Jaeger Manor was the place where wizards and witches who had the ability to transform, tame, and command magical beasts were nurtured. Ekes Manor was the manor that specialized in combat wizards and witches. These students not only used wands, but other magical weapons and artifacts as well. Several of their graduates often become part of the magical knights in their respective territories, as well as the magistratus who help the magical bureau enforce the laws of the magical world to its denizens. Last but not least was the dud manor. This manor was often coined as the dropout manor because those with very little to almost non-existent magic power were sent there to train. All of its residents were called dud, and in time, this term had become a derogatory slang that was used by Edalist professors and students in the academy, who looked down on the talentless and magically crippled students who had enrolled at Brynhildr Academy. "We're here, Ethan," Professor Njal said as they arrived at the plaza inside the academy, where several adults, wearing gray robes standing on an elevated platform, gathered. "This is the Plaza of Beginnings, but since you are here because of a professor's recommendation, you may stand in the VIP area beside the appraisal stone. If I remember correctly, there are only 5 VIPs this year, and you are one of them. I look forward to what manor you will be placed in. By the way, I am one of the professors supervising the Jaeger Manor. If you have any questions regarding magical beasts, you can come find me anytime." The professor chuckled as he led Ethan to the VIP area before standing beside his colleagues on the elevated platform to welcome the new students of Brynhildr Academy. Several of the professors eyed the blue-haired boy with curiosity. As a first year, being able to stand in the VIP area meant that Ethan was one of the geniuses of the young generation. "Zhao, is that the student that Professor Ophelia vouched for this year?" an old wizard with a long white beard asked. "Yes, headmaster," Professor Njal answered. "His name is Ethan." "Ethan?" The old wizard played with his beard as he gazed at the blue-haired teenager from head to foot. A few minutes later, the corner of his lips rose up into a smirk as if he found something very amusing. "Looks like this school year will be more lively than the one we had last year," the old wizard mused. "Professor Ophelia, you have brought a very interesting first year to the academy." The headmaster of Brynhildr Academy chuckled internally as he looked at the anxious-looking teenager in the distance, who had no idea what was about to happen to him next. Half an hour later, all the students of Brynhildr Academy had gathered in the Plaza of Beginnings. Standing beside Ethan were 4 more students who were also chosen as VIP candidates, who were personally chosen by the top professors of the academy. 2 of them were boys, and 2 were girls. All of them seemed to be around 16 to 17 years of age, and all 4 of them were looking at Ethan as if trying to discern his identity. "Do you know him?" a cute-looking young lady with curly blonde hair asked the beautiful lady beside her. "I haven't seen him at any of the wizard gatherings." "No," the beautiful lady with pink hair replied. "Maybe he's one of those reclusive wizards that trains in the mountains." "I see. That explains why he didn't look familiar. But I got to say, he's quite the looker." "Yes, Eias." Ethan, who wasn't aware that the 2 ladies were gossiping about him, was feeling butterflies in his stomach. The last thing he wanted to do was to stand out because he planned to leave the academy after a few days. If people were paying close attention to him, wouldn't that mean that he might get in trouble if he were to leave the academy without permission? Just as the blue-haired teenager was wishing that he was back home at the farm, the headmaster of Brynhildr Academy, Reinhardt Ekes, pointed his wand at his neck before clearing his throat. This sound was magnified several times, catching everyone's attention. Everyone stopped looking at the blue-haired boy and focused their attention on the headmaster of the academy, who was about to give his opening remarks. "The time has come once again for another school year to begin," Professor Reinhardt said with a smile. "Brynhildr Academy has been around for nearly 500 years and has witnessed the growth of many young wizards and witches since it was founded. I don't want to bore all of you with a lengthy speech, so I'll make it short. I welcome all of you, especially the returning students of Brynhildr Academy. May all of you have another wonderful year of learning, and may you grow to become responsible wizards and witches that will make this academy proud." Cheers rose up from the students standing in the Plaza of Beginnings as they gave their headmaster a thunderous applause. Professor Reinhardt smiled before raising his arms to continue his speech. "Joining us today are the first years, who will start their magical education within the academy's walls," Professor Reinhardt stated. "The study of magic isn't just about learning more powerful spells and concocting potions. True magic is the magic that comes from everyone's hearts, for this is the unique magic that allows you to be different from the rest. Although the study of magic branches out into different paths, all roads lead to Yggdrasil. The magic that had been given to you by the great world tree of magic on the day of your birth will one day usher in a new era of prosperity. Because of this mission, Brynhildr Academy was founded. So, it's fine to fail, it is fine to make mistakes, it is fine to feel helpless. Know that this is all part of the learning process. I promise you 1 year from now, when you walk out the doors of the Academy, all of you will have become a brand new and better version of yourselves. Reinhardt then raised his wand and pointed at the sky. The other professors behind him did the same. One by one, the second years, third years, fourth years also pointed their wands to the sky, as they joined the professors in signaling the start of the school year of Brynhildr Academy. May the flames of magic burn forevermore, Professor Reinhardt shouted. Ethan Principium! Ethan Principium! The professors, as well as the second-year students and above, all shouted in unison. A few seconds later, a dazzling ray of light burst forth from the tips of countless wands and flew towards the sky, creating an aurora of different colors. Although everyone used the same spell, the colors of the light that came out of their wands weren't the same. Some were white, some were black. Others were golden, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. However, even these colors had different shades. Some were lighter, and some were darker than most. There were even combinations of other colors, forming unique colors like pink, maroon, teal, yellow, green, and the countless other colors that made up the colors of the world. Ethan's mouth gaped open as he looked at this amazing sight that he never thought was possible. Magic? Ethan thought as his eyes widened in shock. This is magic. When he was still on the farm, he spent most of his days tending the animals. Whenever he wasn't busy, he would often read the fairy tale books that his grandpa had collected over the years. These books had introduced him to the world of wizards and witches that flew in the sky riding broomsticks, as well as shooting magic out of their wands. For the blue-haired boy, these stories weren't real, and simply a fantasy that was written to entertain people. However, right now, he was seeing this fantasy come to life. When the aurora faded, several colorful particles of lights descended upon the sky and landed like snowflakes to the students in the Plaza of Beginnings, blessing them with the beauty of magic. As they embark on another school year inside Brynhildr Academy, where they would continue to learn the many ways they could improve their magic. Everyone, we will now start the sorting of the first years, Professor Reinhardt said with a smile. Once I call your name, please place your hand on the appraisal stone. It will tell you which manor you will be staying at. However, know this, the manor is only a place where you will spend your days to rest within the academy grounds. It is not a label that defines you for what you are. No matter how powerful or how weak your magic is, let your heart lead the way to greatness. Another round of applause reverberated in the Plaza of Beginnings. Even Ethan clapped his hands because he felt touched with the headmaster's words. However, after clapping a few times, the blue-haired boy finally realized what the nagging feeling that he had been feeling was ever since he saw the magical display. Grandma, I think I rode the wrong train, Ethan said internally as the feeling of anxiety increased with each passing second. He never thought that a normal farm boy like him would suddenly find himself in the midst of wizards and witches who all excelled in the power known as magic. Now, first years, it's time for all of you to be sorted with the appraisal stone, Professor Reinhardt said. However, before that, let me introduce to you the 5 pillars of the first years. Professor Reinhardt pointed at the 5 people who were standing at the VIP area near the appraisal stone. Every school year, the chosen professors would look for the most talented wizards and witches in the magic world that were between the ages of 15 and 17. These students would be brought to the Brynhildr Academy and their school tuition and other school expenses would be waived by the Academy. They would also receive a monthly allowance of 500 gold coins, which wasn't an exuberant amount of money, but it would allow them to live a comfortable life in the Academy. The potato chips that Ethan wanted to buy were 5 copper coins. 1 silver coin is worth 100 copper coins, and 1 gold coin is equivalent to 100 silver coins. Everyone, please introduce yourselves. Professor Reinhardt smiled at the 5 teenagers who had been chosen to become the pillars of the first years. A handsome blonde-haired boy stepped forward, making everyone look at him. Langston Kerr, Langston said in an arrogant tone. Well, I look forward to working with all of you this year. Murmurs spread among the students as they looked at the handsome yet arrogant teenage boy that had introduced himself. Kerr, is he a member of that ducal family? I knew that he wasn't simple, so he has that kind of background. Lucky him, good looks, and born as the son of a high-ranking noble. Such a deadly combination. While everyone was talking about Langston, a beautiful lady with long pink hair also stepped forward to introduce herself. Nicole Asta, Nicole said with a smile. It's a pleasure to make everyone's acquaintance. So, her name is Nicole. What a beautiful lady. I think I'm in love. Dude, you fall in love with every beautiful girl you see. This is the 99th time you've said you're in love. Gathering her courage, the cute girl with curly blonde hair also stepped forward and faced everyone with an energetic smile. My name is Lily Langley, Lily stated as she waved at the crowd. Everyone, please look after me in the academy. Oh, how cute. She looks energetic as well. An angel has descended. I think I'm in love. Dude, there you go again. Can you stop? The fourth member of the 5 Pillars was a boy with dark brown hair. He gave the noisy first years a look of annoyance before adjusting the glasses on his face with his middle finger. Kurt Hale, Kurt said simply before crossing his arms over his chest. Well, he doesn't look bad, but he looks scary. He's okay, I guess. For some reason, I want to punch his face. Same, bro, same. After the 4 Pillars introduced themselves, all gazes landed on the handsome blue-haired boy who had a look of resignation on his face. Knowing that he could no longer do anything, Ethan also stepped forward and introduced himself in front of everyone. Ethan Gremory, Ethan stated. I just turned 17 a month ago. He's so good looking. He just turned 17? I wonder if he has a girlfriend. Damn, another good-looking guy appeared. How are we singles going to survive this school year? I never heard of the family named Gremory before. Have you? Maybe he came from another continent. Everyone gave Ethan looks of curiosity, which made the butterflies in his stomach churn once more. Even so, the blue-haired teenager was able to keep a calm expression on his face, making the girls look at him favorably. It is indeed him, a young lady with light brown hair exclaimed internally as she looked at the blue-haired boy in the distance. But what is he doing here? Grandma didn't tell me that he was also a wizard. Also, how did he become one of the pillars? Just how did this happen? The young lady's gaze locked on Ethan's face and looked at him with a face filled with injustice. I'll ask him later, the young lady thought as she clenched her fists. He has a lot of explaining to do. Professor Reinhardt clapped his hands together in order to catch everyone's attention. Now, let the sorting begin, Professor Reinhardt said as he made a gesture for the pillars to touch the appraisal stone. Who wants to go first? Without even waiting for anyone to reply, Langston walked towards the white crystal that was as big as a basketball ball. This was the appraisal stone of Brynhilder Academy that had been around since the day that the academy was founded. Langston then placed his hand on top of the white crystal with a confident smile on his face. A second later, black flames rose upwards from the appraisal stone. The flames had so much intensity that those who saw it felt as if it could burn the entire plaza if left unchecked. However, contrary to the first year's expectations, the flames disappeared without a trace after 10 seconds and 2 words shining in black letters hovered in the air. Schwartz Manor. A round of applause spread in the plaza as the members of Schwartz Manor cheered for the newest member of their residence. Professor Reinhardt smiled as he nodded his head before telling Langston to step aside. Next, please. Professor Reinhardt made a gesture, and Nicole stepped forward to continue the ceremony. As soon as her hands touched the appraisal stone, red flames shot out of it, followed by a column of water. These 2 elements intertwined with each other, like 2 dragons doing a courtship dance. Everyone who saw this scene was mesmerized due to how beautiful it was. When the 2 dragons melded together, the words, Iki's Manor appeared in front of everyone. Such a promising young witch, one of the professors sighed as she clapped her hands. She will definitely be the darling of her house. Suddenly, the cute girl, Lily, ran towards the appraisal stone and playfully touched it with her hand. An illusionary white fox with 4 tails appeared and ran in circles in the air, going higher and higher until it burst out in a shower of white sparks, falling down on everyone like snowflakes. A moment later, the words Jaeger Manor appeared, making the members of her manor cheer for her. So troublesome, the boy with dark brown hair with spectacles muttered as he also placed his hand on the appraisal stone. Suddenly, several vines filled with thorns appeared around him and spread in the surroundings. They were like venomous snakes that were out to bite anyone that drew near them. The vines even reached the place where the first years were, which made several of them cry out in alarm. However, before the vines could even touch any of them, they all turned into green light that merged together, forming the words, Terra Manor. "It's your turn, Ethan," Professor Reinhardt said kindly, as he urged the blue-haired teenager to touch the appraisal stone. "Oh, okay," Ethan stuttered as he walked rigidly like a robot towards the appraisal stone, which made several girls giggle as they looked at the handsome teenager who was walking in a weird manner. Ethan stood in front of the appraisal stone and took a deep breath. Here goes nothing, Ethan thought as he raised his hand. He no longer cared about anything and had thrown caution into the wind. Just as the boy was about to touch the appraisal stone, a loud shriek spread in the surroundings. "Stop!" Professor Ophelia shouted as her griffin descended from the sky. Due to the commotion, Ethan turned around to look at the person who shouted at him. However, the moment he did that, his gaze landed on the beautiful silver-haired girl, who looked surprisingly familiar to him. "It's you!" Ethan almost shouted as he pointed her finger at the girl whom he had bumped into him in the station. The silver-haired lady held his gaze, and a faint trace of anger appeared on her beautiful face. Clearly, she wasn't happy about her near-death encounter that had happened a few hours ago. Right now, Alice wanted nothing more than to slap the blue-haired boy's face and make him apologize for taking her place. "It's you!" Ethan shouted as he pointed at the silver-haired young lady that was mounted on top of a creature, who was half eagle, half lion. "Ah, Professor Ophelia, perfect timing," Professor Njal said with a smile. "The candidate you chose is about to get sorted. You must be looking forward to it, right?" Professor Ophelia's body stiffened after hearing Professor Njal's reply. She had done her best to arrive at the academy as soon as she could, and the moment she arrived at the plaza, the blue-haired boy, who had accidentally picked up her niece's train ticket, was about to place his palm on the appraisal stone. At that time, the only thought in her mind was to stop the boy at all costs, so she subconsciously shouted with all of her might. Now that she succeeded in stopping the sorting ceremony, the next thing that appeared in her head was the question. "What now? I'm sorry for barging in on this special occasion in such a manner," Professor Ophelia said as soon as she regained her composure. "But there is a very important matter that I need to address with that boy." "Young man, come with me, please." Ethan sighed in his heart because someone had come to his rescue. However, before he could even take a step to head in Professor Ophelia's direction, an old yet firm hand rested on his shoulders, preventing him from taking a single step. "Professor Ophelia, that can wait until Ethan finishes the ceremony," Professor Reinhardt replied. "It is very rude to stop the school's tradition just because you say so." Headmaster, I am not stopping the tradition. I just want to have a talk with the boy. Ethan, you can talk to him after the ceremony ends. Or, is there something that you're not telling us, Professor? The headmaster of Brynhilder Academy eyed Professor Ophelia with a gaze that made the latter shiver. It was as if she was a small mouse that came face to face with a cat that was about to pounce on her if she uttered another word. Because of this, Professor Ophelia was at a loss on what to do. Seeing that her aunt couldn't do anything, Alice stepped forward to tell everyone that the boy was only an ordinary person and accidentally rode the wrong train that brought him to Brynhilder Academy. However, before she could even say anything, the tip of Professor Ophelia's wand touched her back. "Silentium," Professor Ophelia said in a tone that was barely a whisper, preventing anyone from hearing her. Immediately, Alice lost her voice and was unable to say what she was going to say no matter how much she tried to speak. "Dear, it's no use," Professor Ophelia whispered in Alice's ear as she motioned for her niece to stop. "We can't do anything right now." Professor Ophelia lowered her head in resignation because the headmaster of Brynhilder Academy was someone that she couldn't cross no matter what. Seeing that the headmaster was adamant to let Ethan finish the ceremony, she could only accept the fact that she would be punished severely for letting an ordinary mortal enter the grounds of the Academy of Magic. "Go ahead, Ethan," Professor Reinhardt said with a smile. "Don't worry, all you need to do is place your hand on that appraisal stone and it will be over." But, headmaster, I think it is best if I talk to Professor Ophelia. It seems that she really has something very important to tell me, Ethan replied. You can talk to her later, Professor Reinhardt stated as he pointed at the appraisal stone behind Ethan. Come now, the ceremony has already been delayed enough. There are other first years waiting for their turn. Ethan gave a sidelong glance to Professor Ophelia, but the latter had her head lowered, not making eye contact with him. Only the silver-haired beauty, who was now unable to talk, glared at him, making him subconsciously take a step back. Don't worry, Ethan, Professor Reinhardt patted the boy's shoulder. You're thinking too much. Everything is going to be fine. Before Ethan could even give a reply, the headmaster of the academy flicked his wand. A second later, Ethan's hand moved by itself and placed it on top of the appraisal stone, making the blue-haired boy scream internally. No blazing flames rose up in the air. No magical creatures appeared to dance in front of everyone. No magical lights of various colors spread in the surroundings. Updated from Novia Being, Opamol, all that everyone could see was nothing. The professors all frowned. Some of them even squinted their eyes in order to see if there was some kind of magical effect coming out of the appraisal stone that they were just unable to see. A few seconds passed with still nothing happening. Professor Ophelia sighed in her heart as she looked at the boy who wasn't supposed to be in the academy, looking awkwardly at the stone in front of him. At that moment, the black bracelet that had been given to Ethan by the middle-aged lady who was selling snacks in the train vibrated. The vibration was very subtle that even Ethan wasn't able to feel it due to how anxious he was feeling. Suddenly, a faint spark appeared above the appraisal stone. The spark lasted for only 4 seconds before disappearing completely. A dud? Professor Nya blinked in confusion. Professor Ophelia chose a dud? The sound of murmurs spread in the surroundings as Professor Reinhardt chuckled and patted Ethan's shoulder. Looks like the Dud Manor is getting a new member today, Professor Reinhardt announced. Over a dozen individuals started to clap their hands and cheer for Ethan. Clearly, they were very happy that they were going to have a new member who would share their suffering. Yes, they were the members of the Dud Manor, the manor that was designated for those who had very little to almost non-existent magic powers. Professor Ophelia, who saw this, felt as if she had been spared from being executed by the guillotine. A dud might be the lowest member of the magic society, and was almost no different from ordinary humans. However, a dud is still considered half a wizard or witch, so the professor who had resigned herself to her fate felt elated. Fortunately, he is a dud. Professor Ophelia looked at the blue-haired boy who now stood stiffly beside the other 4 pillars. Thank the gods. Ethan, who stood at the same place as the other pillars of the academy, didn't share Professor Ophelia's happiness. In fact, he was feeling very awkward as he endured the gazes of the 4 people beside him as they looked at him weirdly. Filthy dud, Langston snorted. To think you would share the same honor as me. How infuriating. Truth be told, Langston wanted to spit at the blue-haired boy, but since he was a candidate chosen by a professor, he didn't dare to do so. Although he was a member of a ducal family inside Brynhilder Academy, he couldn't offend any professor, especially someone like Professor Ophelia, who had recently become an honorary magistratus. Now that the pillars have finished being sorted, may I ask all the first years to fall in line, Professor Reinhardt stated. All of you need to be sorted, and after that, we will begin the initiation ceremony. I look forward to everyone's performance. Ethan, who was still in a state of shock and confusion, noticed someone in the long line of first years, who was staring intently at him. Eh? Ethan blinked as he looked at someone he knew very well. What's she doing here? The young lady with light brown hair noticed Ethan's gaze at her and immediately raised her clenched fist, which made the blue-haired boy subconsciously take a step back. He didn't expect that in a magic academy that was several miles away from home, he would meet up with his cousin, who often bullied him whenever she visited their farmhouse during her summer vacations. After the first years finished getting sorted by the appraisal stone, the headmaster of Brynhilder Academy clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. Now, it is time for the yearly tradition of Brynhilder Academy, Professor Reinhardt, with a mischievous smile on his face. Every year, around this time, the new batch of students in the academy will do the initiation ceremony after they have been sorted to their respective manors. This year's challenge was painstakingly prepared by our dark magic professors. I'm sure that all of you will have fun, so without further delay, I wish all the first years good luck in their first challenge. Professor Reinhardt then pointed his wand at the center of the Plaza of Beginnings and said, Inceptos porta aparium. A second later, a giant blue portal appeared, which almost made Ethan jump back in surprise. Before he could even understand what just happened, the 4 teenagers beside him, who were part of the pillars of the first year, ran towards the portal without any hesitation. The other first years did the same, which made Ethan wonder what was going on. You should get going too, Ethan, Professor Reinhardt said kindly. Great rewards will be given to the first 10 people that are able to clear this quest. What is this quest, Headmaster? Ethan inquired. Can I not take it? Professor Reinhardt chuckled after hearing Ethan's words. He then lightly tapped the blue-haired shoulder with his wand with a smile. No, everyone must go, Professor Reinhardt replied. Are you going to go by yourself, or should I help you? The blue-haired boy sighed in his heart before walking towards the portal with a look of anxiety on his face. The students in the plaza looked at him with various expressions, making him feel as if they were all making fun of him. When Ethan was only a step away from the portal, he took a deep breath before taking that last step to the unknown. As soon as he entered the portal, it disappeared, leaving the first years no way out of the challenge that was given to them as their initiation ceremony. You're the last one to come, a beautiful woman with red hair and wearing gray clothes said as soon as Ethan appeared in front of her. Do you have a wand with you? Or would you prefer to use a magic weapon instead? You will need it in order to clear the exams. Wand? Weapon? Ethan blinked in confusion. What kind of exam are we doing? The beautiful woman smiled as she gave the blue-haired boy a long and hard look. Have you ever been to a dungeon before? The beautiful woman asked. Dungeon? What's that? Ethan asked back. I understand now. The beautiful woman smirked. Well then choose a weapon of your choice first. After that, I will explain how you will pass this test. Make sure to choose wisely because your life depends on it. Ethan didn't like the way the beautiful professor phrased the words, your life depends on it. However, since her words had an effect, the blue-haired boy inspected all the weapons that were available in the room one by one. After seeing everything, he looked back helplessly at the beautiful woman and asked a question. Do you have a pitchfork? Ethan asked. A pitchfork? The beautiful woman arched an eyebrow. Why do you need a pitchfork? I grew up on a farm, and it's the tool I am most familiar with. I see. Well, if that is what you want, then I'll accommodate you. The beautiful professor smiled as she grabbed something from the air. A minute later, she was holding a round metallic ball and handed it to the blue-haired boy, who looked at it in confusion. This is called a molding ball, the beautiful professor explained. It is made from magical cold iron and will transform into any shape that the user desires. This cost me 200 gold coins to make, but I'll lend it to you free of charge. Now, close your eyes and visualize a pitchfork in your head. Ethan obeyed the professor and closed his eyes. The molding ball in his hand felt cold, and yet there was a sense of familiarity in it. A moment later, the metallic ball transformed into an iron pitchfork. Ethan felt the moment the ball transformed, and when he opened his eyes, he was holding a pitchfork in his hands. Amazing, Ethan thought, as he gave the pitchfork a few practice swings as he tested its weight. It has the right length, weight, and balance. It is as if this pitchfork was perfectly made for me. Seeing how amazed the blue-haired boy was, the beautiful professor wasn't able to stop herself from giggling. How innocent, the professor thought. It reminded me of the time when I first discovered magic. The professor wanted to reminisce, but she knew that now wasn't the time. She then began to explain to Ethan what the test was about, and made sure that the teenage boy understood every word of it. So, I just have to find the exit in order to clear this test? Ethan inquired. Yes, the professor replied. Monsters will be spawning randomly inside the dungeon, and you either run from them or fight them. The choice is yours to make. This test also has a deadline. After 2 hours, the test will end and all the students will be kicked out of the dungeon automatically. So, you don't have to worry about not being able to get out if you get lost. Just do your best to survive. Ethan patted his chest after listening to the professor's words. So I just need to wait 2 hours and I'll be kicked out of the dungeon, right? Yes, the professor replied. But You should do your best, young one. There are some amazing prices that we prepared this year. They are much better than that molding ball you are carrying right now. Well then, time for you to go. The clock is ticking. The beautiful professor didn't even wait for Ethan's reply and dragged him towards the only door in the room. Find new stories on Novelben.com. Good luck, I'm rooting for you. Those were the last words that the professor said before she pushed Ethan through the door, making the latter's head almost fall headfirst on the ground. As soon as he regained his balance, the blue-haired boy looked at his surroundings and came across a young lady with light brown hair who was leaning on the wall of the dungeon. Took you long enough. The young lady walked towards Ethan with a huff. She then placed her hands on her waist as her beautiful green eyes locked onto his face, making Ethan take a subconscious step backwards. See, Chloe, fancy meeting you here, Ethan stuttered. Why didn't you tell me that you were a witch? And why didn't you tell me that you were a wizard? Chloe asked back as she took a step forward, which made Ethan take another step backwards. If I knew that you were coming to the academy, I would have gone with you. Ethan kept on taking a step back until he felt the wall of the dungeon pressing against his back. Although he got along very well with Chloe, she was like a wild honey badger when she got angry and would not hesitate to smack anyone, including him when she felt like it. The boys in the village where he lived were all afraid of her because she would smack them silly if they teased her, or Ethan whenever they were together. However, Ethan knew that Chloe was a very kind girl. She just had this bad habit of punching people when she became embarrassed, especially because their friends called her Ethan's summer girlfriend, whenever she visited the farm during her summer break. Wait, Chloe, there is a good explanation for this, Ethan said. Actually, I got here by ACC. As soon as Ethan was going to say that he got there by accident, he suddenly found himself unable to talk. This was similar to what happened to Alice in the Plaza of Beginnings when her aunt used a silencing spell on her. Chloe, who saw that something seemed to be wrong with her cousin, lightly tapped his chest with her wand. A moment later, a faint purple glow shone on Ethan's chest, which made Chloe frown. After thinking for a few seconds, she made a gesture for the blue-haired boy to lower his head, so that she could whisper something to him. Someone used a special silencing spell on you, Chloe whispered. Let's talk about it later. First, we need to find the exit of this dungeon. Although Ethan was still a bit confused, he nodded his head and agreed with Chloe's proposal. The professor earlier said that this dungeon is dangerous, Ethan said before holding Chloe's hand. Let's go and find the exit together. Okay, Chloe replied, and allowed herself to be pulled by the blue-haired boy to start exploring the dungeon. Since Ethan was looking in front of them, he didn't see the faint blush that appeared on Chloe's face as they walked hand in hand in a place where the undead sought the warmth of the living.